好，5:05左右哈，那感谢大家，现在我们大概20来位，不过一般我们的活动整体上来讲，大概会在30-40位小伙伴左右吧。然后我们本期的节目录制完了之后呢，也会发在Fryhigh 的 LinkedIn 呢，还有我们的那个 Facebook、YouTube 上面，也方便以后所有想要跟 UX 相关的小伙伴们去查阅，好吧？然后呢，这里我先简单的再介绍一下哈，当然会看到这个活动来的，应该也都是我们自己的熟客。Fryhigh 是我们公司在美国算是比较独特的，专门为华人人群进行工作的职业规划以及公司的这种招聘的猎头公司了。然后呢，我们也一直致力于说能够找到更多华人圈里面的一些专家大牛、厉害的学长学姐，对吧？来帮我们解答一些关于职场的问题。然后呢，上一次我们有产品经理啦，有一些财务会计啦，还有一些跟科技类相关的。然后呢，我们有经常发现找工作的小伙伴里面有问到就是那种 UI/UX。那 UI/UX 其实是一个非常广阔的话题哈。那我们本来想找说有没有真的存在这种 UI/UX 的 designer 或者工程师，后来发现其实 UI 跟 UX 还是非常还是分得蛮开的哈。一个人能做好一样就不容易了，所以其实经过仔细的挑选 ，oops， 大家不好意思，现在大家都在家工作，相信都有狗的还有 baby 哭闹的问题哈。好，所以我们现在仔细研究一下今天这个话题吧。今天我们请来的是Kitty 许，是这一段话我来读一遍哈，然后希望大家可以接受我的这个普通话。目前呢 ，Kitty 许是就职于 Pinterest， 担任高级定量用户体验研究主管。昨天Kitty 学姐说了，这个翻译得很好，让她终于能够翻译成中文，让她父母也知道一下自己在做什么。然后呢，通过分析行为数据和调查数据来研究终端用户体验。Kitty 在公司建立的是Quant UX 的行为准则定义，还有度量用户体验的指标，并指导初级研究员。然后在加入 Pinterest 之前呢 ，Kitty 在学术界也花了10年时间从事神经科学研究，并在Johns Hopkins 约翰斯霍普金斯大学获得认知神经学博士学位。那 Kitty 学姐是我的亲学姐哈，所以今天呢，我也会称她为学姐。大家今天也可以就在今天这段时间里面，可以称 Kitty 为学姐。回头咱们活动本身完毕之后呢，教大家一个很好的方法哈。LinkedIn 上面呢，或者是想要去 reach out 一下咱们 Kitty 学姐，咨询一些关于 Pinterest 的工作或者 UX 的问题的话，大家可以提到说，哎呀 Kitty 学姐对吧？那天听了您的讲座，哎，觉得非常的受益良多，然后想跟您再交流交流哈。相信我，这个聊天方式一般都能够比较让人家能接受，能愿意加你哈。不然平时你要 LinkedIn 去加一些比较厉害的人，大家都很害羞吧？其实要大胆一点，找工作还是要能够努力的踏出这一个第一步，好吧？所以呢，那我们今天的主题就围绕了这个 UX 来展开，大家呢边听也可以边准备一些自己相关的话题。相信有很多的小伙伴呢也是在想将来可以从事 UI 或者 UX。那今天的所有的这个重点也就集中在了 Pinterest 这家刚刚上市不久、非常厉害的公司的咱们这位Kitty 学姐来解答我们关于这个 UX 很多这种神经科学方面的内容。好吧，所以那现在的话，我们就请Kitty 学姐可以先开个摄像头跟大家 say 个 hi， 然后呢，我们可以再看看您的准备的 PPT， 好吧？
谢谢 Gary。I think 我先跟大家抱歉一下，我在美国待了15年，发现我中文退化很严重，所以他们跟我一直说我到底是做什么，我就中文说不出来。就包括这个 title， 我觉得翻译的好像听起来挺厉害的，其实也就是一个 research lead， 所以我没有觉得 title 好像有太大的it doesn't really matter。所以我跟你们今天要讲的是关于the value of Let me just switch to English because I really don't know how to say this in Chinese。
没关系，我昨天Kitty 学姐还说过，说不知道怎么办，说万一英文讲太多了，我说还好，我们的观众的英文水平都比较高，而且如果是想从事 UI/UX 的话，如果真听不懂这些 terms， 那可见你可能离这行业比较远。如果今天 Kitty 学姐讲完之后，大家觉得一头雾水，没听懂的话，可能这行不是你们该去从事的，欢迎咨询 Fly High 的猎头顾问，咱们研究一下别的行业，好不好？好的，放心吧 ，Kitty 学姐，您尽管按照您舒适的方式来讲这个 topic 就好了。然后你可以 share 一下你那边的 screen， 好吧？
谢谢。等一下 ，Every time I try to do something on this technical challenge. Give me a second.
对的，这种大牛一般在公司里是不负责这个会议的这种调整的，一般下面是有人在做的。
因为公司基本上都在用 Google， 所以 Zoom 我用不太好，你等我讲，等我再找一下。
没事没事，你慢慢 share 一下，对。所以对大家有我在主持的话，相对轻松活泼点哈，大家可以先想一想问题哈。其实我真的觉得 UI UX， 其实我以前不是这个专业的。By the way 哈，国内很多把 UX 称之为 UE 哈，我当时一看 UE 是什么，那发现是 User Experience 的时候，他们把它简写，我们美国这边简写成 X， 国内很多人简写成 E 哈。但 anyway， 所以大家其实很多人都称自己是 UI UX Designer。但其实真的是跟真的这个领域差别蛮大的，所以今天就是好好深度了解一下咱们这个 UX 的真实所做的一些事情。好的，那 Kitty 学姐就交给你了，来。
现在可以看，现在可以看到了吧？
可以的，我看得到。OK。
I'm just going to use English, it's easier. So I'm going to cover 4 things for today's agenda. First thing is introduction, then a little bit about what Pinterest is, and then Pinterest research, and I'll save some time at the end. Introduction, really, it's just a little bit about what I do for work. So I've been at Pinterest a little bit more than 4 years, and I joined as the second quantitative UX researcher on the team. And now we've grown to about 3 people. Usually when you think about quantitative, it's a small population compared to the rest of the UX. And I'll talk about it more when I go into the details. And before I was at Pinterest, I was at Hopkins, where Gary also went to Hopkins. So I got my PhD from cognitive neuroscience, where I did functional brain imaging. So that study, if anyone who is a Hopkins alumni out there, this is Kennedy Krieger Institute for the Imaging Research. So that's a lot of human fMRI research. I also did a lot of eye tracking with both humans and monkeys. So I did both monkeys and monkey electrophysiology and human brain imaging. And while I was Hopkins, I did a summer internship in my 4th year at Thomson Reuters, and I was interning as a data scientist. And the job at the time was to really try to developing algorithm to study detecting phishing URL. So if you have a phishing fraudulent URL, how can we use a machine learning model to detect these fraudulent URL? I liked the internship. It made me realize I wanted to go to industry. I don't want to stay in academia. But the problem with data science for me, it's really dry. It felt really just data crunching, as opposed to what I really was interested in is study humans and why they do what they do. So that's why I was like, okay, I want to go to industry, but I kind of want to do something related to humans. And that's how I found quantitative UX research. And then before Hopkins, I was at Stanford and basically my own career trajectory was always in academic, doing research related to neuroscience. And also I like outdoors. I just want to give you guys an overview of things of what I do for fun. So I don't just always work. I do a lot of outdoor stuff. So Pinterest overview. So Pinterest, I don't know how many you have used Pinterest. So Pinterest is really a visual discovery engine. If you think about Google, it's really search engine where you find the needles in the haystack. Whereas Pinterest, it's the process of finding the needles going through that haystack. So it's more like a discovery engine as opposed to a search engine. And a lot of people really come to Pinterest with ideas they want to find about their lives. And because of the research, we realized Pinterest mission, as defined by a lot of research, is Pinterest brings everyone the inspiration to create a life they love. Every research we talk about to pinners or people who use Pinterest, we call them pinner. We ask them, what do you find the value of using Pinterest? People say, it's the inspiration. I come here for inspiration. And we have a lot of interest. So that's a lot of traveling, parenting, beauty, hairstyle, fashion, food decor, food and home decor. These are all the key verticals for Pinterest. And the word inspiration, I feel like now everyone's cooped up at home, so you don't really think about what I'm gonna do. I can't even travel, so what's the point of doing traveling? And that's actually not the case. What we find is initially when COVID hit, people was panicking and stopped planning for future. They were really worried about task at hand. But over the time, once you are settled more into the shelter in place, people start resuming inspiration seeking, because that's just gives you hope looking forward to something in the future. And the next word is really everyone. I think this is particularly topical now, at least in the US, where a lot of people don't feel belong. And really on Pinterest, when we're trying to discover what we're trying to do, including the content quality, is really tailored to everyone. So no matter your social background, your culture, your skin of your color, you feel like you come to Pinterest and there's a place for you because the content is relevant for you. So really it's about everyone. And I actually had to give a similar talk, maybe back in March. It was delayed. At the time, we had about 335 million monthly active user. Right now, we have about 413. So the growth is really like flying out because of the shelter in place. So now I'm going to talk about Pinterest research. We are really trying to be the voice of the user. That's what really the research team is trying to do, because a fact is a fact. Perception is the reality. And our goal really is to understand what people's realities are when they're using Pinterest. Because people are really complex. They will say things, they will do things, and they think and feel things. And often these don't align. And our job as researchers is to find the meaning of these misalignment and really understanding the why. I already said it, I guess. We try to make sense of it all. By the way, all the images I'm using are actually Pinterest users. So we did, this is a brand equity study. This is one of the head research back in 2017. And we go into participants' house and talk to them, asking them what they feel about Pinterest and why you're using Pinterest. This is the founder of Pinterest research team, and he was synthesizing research ideas in front of a sea of, I guess, Post-it notes. And then we also, try to make sense of it all and derive meanings. So if you do a Google search, or if you do a words crowding on LinkedIn, you will find these are the most frequent appeared words on people's LinkedIn profile under UX researchers or anyone who does consumer-facing research. You'll see there's market research, which is a big part of the UX research, and there's a lot of design research. Sometimes you'll hear content strategist or usability or brand strategy. So these are all really, and a lot of people have anthropology background, psychology background, neuroscience, economics, sometimes statistics and data science, all shows up in this this word crowd, which really means people in this field, UX, actually has a lot of diverse background. You might not trained as a traditional human-computer interaction, which is it's like 科班 in Chinese, it's probably 科班出身的。
这里是重点，对，这里是重点啊，同学们，你看多少专业可以成为 UX 的专家，对吧 ？Kitty 学姐也已经列了很多个专业了哈。我觉得对，科班不一定是科班出身，但是这么多专业都可以成为 UX，is important，yeah。
Yeah. So really on the research team at Pinterest, we have 3 different types of methodology. I already mentioned earlier, there's market research, there's quantitative, and there's qualitative. And the first one I want to talk about is market research. So it really is trying to understand the people's attitude and sentiment at scale. And we oftentimes doing surveys. So I don't know if you guys have ever received a survey from any of the product you use, or asking you questions like how happy are you with this product, or how likely you are going to recommend this product to someone else. So that's market research. A typical question you can answer or ask is, hey, how does Pinterest perform in the US market compared to, say, Chinese market? Or I know China's blocked Pinterest now, so it's not a new issue, but like, hey, what do people in Europe, in UK, in Brazil think about Pinterest compared to what people feel about in the US? So that's competitive analysis. And that's what market research does as one example. Second is, say, for example, we're not so sure what does the market needs right now. I don't want to build something without base the decision on the data. So let's go run some market research and seeing what's the competitive intelligence the market says before we go build something. And so that is relevant to what the consumer wants. So that's market research. A lot of the time they use survey and they care about statistical significance. The second one, it's quantitative UX research, which is actually what I do. It's understanding people's attitude at scale, but also layer on that behavioral component. So we assess the what, but actually sometimes also why. I didn't put why there. So again, it's a large sample size. We care about stats. And oftentimes with quantitative, you have to do the survey in product. So market researchers, when they send surveys, you do not have to be a Pinterest user to get this data because we want it to be unbiased sample. For quantitative, the time when I reach my survey respondent is through in product. So you have to be on Pinterest to get my survey. And now the advantage of doing that is I can look at your behavior because people can say one thing and do a different thing. That's notoriously known in the political science. The poll will suggest one way, whereas look at 2016, Hillary was the leading candidate in the poll, in all the polls, but look at the results, right? So quantitative, you have the attitude part, how people like about Pinterest, how they don't like about Pinterest, and then I have the behavior part, which is, hey, you say you like about Pinterest. Let me see what you are doing on Pinterest. Does what you do on Pinterest match with what you say or think or feel about Pinterest? And that's what quantitative UX research does. And the third point is a qualitative researcher or a qualitative UX research. Actually, when you talk to any researchers, unless they say, I'm a quantitative UX researcher, you can assume by default they're qualitative by nature. So these are study behavior and attitude of users at a much smaller scale. And it's really meant to understand the whys. It's much smaller sample size. Usually you'll see a focus group, in-person interview, or contextual inquiry means you go to someone's house and you see how they use that product in their natural environment. Because sometimes if we recruiting participants to come to Pinterest, it's in a laboratory setting. We try to make it unbiased and neutral, friendly. It still is in a lab setting. You don't come to Pinterest. So a lot of people using Pinterest in their natural life setting. Hey, I sit on my couch on Sunday. I wasn't doing anything else. I'm going to check my Pinterest or social media or whatever. So that's contextual inquiry. And because it's interview, it's one-on-one user interview, you can actually have a conversation with the users and you can get much deeper. When someone says something, you can ask them why you said this thing. You can have more richer context than I can survey you, asking you how do you like about this thing. You can give me a 5 out of 7 point scale, or you can write me open-end answers, but I can't get that rich, detailed context unless I talk to someone directly. And that's what qualitative UX researcher does. And then this is where I think this map actually, I made this, it illustrates the relationships between UX research and data science. So quantitative UX research really sits in the overlapping area. It does user research. It's like the data science with a very focused approach on user experience. And then some of the market research also doing data science or doing survey. And then there is a particular sub-branch called survey science, where their job is caring about sampling rate, sampling methodology. They care less so about user experience, but their training, their technical background is in survey science. You see a lot of this in social studies. And qualitative was all the way to the left because it is actually a traditional UX research. I should also mention, a lot of people also probably heard of a usability study. So that's also qualitative research. You design something, you want to make sure the user flow is intuitive, it's user-friendly, and then you use usability study. And next question is, when does research come in the product research and development stage? And the answer is actually it's in all stages. So a typical product development, you have the define. So the define is define the problem, define the product you wanted to build, and then you ideate. So think about different ways you could build this thing, and then you actually build it. So a lot of engineering goes into the build stage, and then you deploy, which means you ship this product or you test this product, and then you want to measure whether this product is going to be successful or not. And UX research coming all 5 stages, and you can break them into 3 big buckets. So that's strategic, tactical, and evaluative. In the strategic side, for example, you can ask questions like, hey, what type of guidance do new users need when they sign up for Pinterest? A tactical question could be, hey, what steps in the sign up process that is clear or confusing to new users? And then evaluative is more like, hey, now the product is in the field. People have been using it. How satisfied are they with Pinterest search results, for example? And the last part I'll say is what really UX research is all about is putting user first. And we're really encouraging the entire product development leadership or the whole organization to think about what they do by grounding in two questions. The first one is, who is our user? And second, really critical, what user problems are we solving? Because too many times you can hear some great ideas, someone just dreamed up about it without grounding in the true user needs. And you develop this thing, you spend all this engineering design time, develop this product, and then you find no one actually wants to use it. I think a classic example is Segway, this Segway, this thing you see, if you go to DC, you'll get on Segway, and then you can go around the city by sitting on the Segway. I think Segway development was that it was not grounded in user true needs. Whereas you think about Lyft and Uber, even Scooter, because people actually are demanding the needs for that. And that's why these products are successful. And Segway, I think today, there is some still usage, but it was not as popular as what the original founder had hoped. Because the problem was it was not grounded in the user's problem. So that's all I have. That's all I had for a presentation.
OK， 谢谢 Kitty 学姐啊，你果然答应过我会讲中文，没想到你整个句子里面讲了对2到3个字的中文，那也算哈。OK， 好的。那个大家刚才那个 Kitty 学姐花了一点时间，先把那个Pinterest 这个东西，我第一次看见 Pinterest 其实是我太太在使用哈。当时他们每天就是看一些自己喜欢的一些图片 Google 的时候，那就会把它就是用它这种 Pinterest 给 save 到另外一个地方。当时我在想，可是我已经在 Google 找到照片了，为什么我要再把它 save 到另外一个地方？其实直到今天，我对 Pinterest 确实哈，我就不是它的 target customer， 但是它确实是一个我太太用到今天都非常好的一种图片的 engine。然后那至于那个 Kitty 学姐本身所做的这个 UX， 也刚才提到了，不只是说她学这种神经科学这么看起来听起来也不知道是什么才能够做这个 UX 就 user experience 的这种 research， 其实做统计啊，学数学、经济学，其实很多都是可以的。我们有蛮多的在平时找工作的一些 PhDs， 包括做那个真的是数学统计的 PhDs， 毕业之后都很难找到一个比较好的 direction 去发展。当然除了 engineer 这条路线哈，但是那个还是我相信 Kitty 学姐指出了一条比较好的一个渠道。那么我接下来大家可以先开始的去想一些问题啊，不管是关于 Pinterest 还是包括 UX 这个岗位本身。但是我们每一天在帮很多人找工作，所以 Kitty 学姐，我先代表这个我们平日很多想要做 UI UX 的小伙伴，可以 question 有几个简单的 question 哈。第一个 question 是，那请问 UX 这个行业的整体的这个 compensation 的这个 range， 当然这个很 broad 的 question 哈，就是万一我想当一个 UX 的这方面的 research 的这样一个人才，或者是说一个比较 lead 的 level 的时候，可能会有多少的一个工资，一直都是这个，既然是个行业，大家都会关心，想知道一下这个跟一些 software engineer 是不是很大的差别？
So UX research sits under the product org as opposed to marketing or business intelligence. So under the product, there's design, there's eng, and there's research. So it's in the same rank. Obviously, engineers will always be paid more than UX research at the same level doing similar levels work. At least in tech, that's what I'm aware. I don't know about outside of tech. But UX researchers are respected and actually are very well sought out because too many products now, at least in tech, are finding that they don't really know what their users need. So they need to talk to researchers and through research to find out. So it's actually a very high demand job, and it's considered a unicorn in this field at UX. So it's well paid, but it's not going to be as well as an engineer. But here's another question I ask you. When I was looking for jobs, I wasn't care how much I was going to be paid. Otherwise, I think everyone just study finance, study investment banking. I always ask myself, what am I really interested in? I could have gone to data science, but it was much drier than what I wanted to do. So I stayed in UX research.
OK， 很好哈。然后那个其实具体的工资如果是 numbers 的话，大家倒是可以去那个 salary.com 或者是 Glassdoor 可以查一下。但是那个其实我们也意识到 UX 的这种 scientist 或者这方面的人才很少。像刚才 Kitty 学姐说到的，你们 Pinterest 直到上市的今天，你的 team 里面的 how many teammates in your team？
Research team, Pinterest research team has I think 18个人 at 18.
UX 的。
整个 Google, I think Google is probably everyone knows Google, so I think Google has more than 100K employee, 100,000 employees, and I think about 1,000 of them is UX researcher, and about 100 of them is quantitative UX researcher.
OK， 所以可以说接近于1/1000的人在 Google 这样的公司里面。OK， like the number is correct 。like 是做这个 Quant。
1到100，我觉得1到100的 ratio 可能是
OK 1比100 OK
1比100，然后 qualitative 和 quantitative 比例一般是1到16，所以 one quant map to 16 or 17 qualitative
OK
差不多。
这个是一个非常专业的一个领域了哈。然后那个下一个就刚才其实您有提到了，就是说其实很多专业是可以加入到成为这 UX 的这方面的这种领域的哈。那我想问一下，在您的团队里，就是 Pinterest， 请问你见过最专业不相关的，就是比如说什么专业跳过来的转型？因为我们有很多人其实都在寻找转型的一个机会，可能 I like UX but I study like economics or I study accounting, can I do it？ 这就是一个 question 这样子。
我觉得我们组一个还是有2个是 HCI， 就是科班出身 computer interaction, human computer interaction. One of them is actually a PhD in human computer interaction. He's very interesting. He had his PhD in HCI. He became an engineer at Amazon because he needs job to pay whatever salary the student loan, and then he converted back to research because he said, I found myself more interested in understanding people than building that product. 但是其他很多专业，譬如说 communication 专业的
，OK，
we have a researcher, 她的 background 是 literature, she likes to write, and 还有 I think business,
okay,
yeah,
sure.
还有 international study, because if you study international affairs, international relations, you can be a market researcher doing international research. Say we're going to launch a product in China. You have to go to China to understand what Chinese like, what's their culture, how can that be relevant? And that's what market research does. So it's international affair.
That's true. 那 OK， 那这个 Thomas， 我们有 Thomas 同学问的一个问题，我觉得是紧接着这个。假如我是 business major， 或者我是那 international studies， 那可能我没有学过一些 coding、一些 tool 相关的一些 skill set。那我们的问题是，假如我们不是这种科班出身，又是 business 相关的，请问要学什么样的 software tools 会帮我们进入 UX？
UX, so quantitative UX, you need to know how to write code. You need to but it's not as like engineer, you have to write production code. We don't write production code. Or data scientists, sometimes you have to write production code. You need to know how to code, or at least in R or Python or any statistical packaging. Excel is not going to be enough. You also need to know how to write SQL, so query data, because you query behavioral data out of the log. So you have to know how to write SQL, how to code either Python or if you're in academia, MATLAB. Once you know one language, it can be easily learned like other languages, but you have to know how to code and statistics. But qualitative researchers, they don't write code. They just, Excel is the most I've ever seen. You have to be really good at communicating and writing. And you have to know, because you have to communicate with your research finding. You have to write a discussion guide when you talk to interviewees. You need to know what you're talking about. You have to have a conversation. That's writing and communication. Market research, they don't really do a lot of coding either. So Excel is to the extent they would use.
Okay.
These are the tools.
Okay, cool. Thank you. 那我们还有一位同学问的问题是说，想知道一下 Quant UX 是怎么是 cooperate with the other UX 和 DS 的 products 的，或者说这个是有什么样的一个 difference between between Quant UX 跟那个 data scientist 这个到底有没有什么具体点区别可以找得出来的？
Yeah, so data science has a much higher requirement, I think, for probabilities and statistics, and writing code that can be productionized. A lot of quantitative UX researcher can have that background too, but it's not a must required. So the bar style, I don't want to come across as be like, hey, we don't have a bar for that. We have a bar, it's just not as high as data science. The second part really is the interest. I care less. I don't really care how much money advertisers are spending on Pinterest or WAUs, DAUs, or daily active user and weekly, monthly active user. To me, these are just numbers. That's crunching number. That's what a lot of data science do. They do models, they do forecasting, they do budgeting, they do predicting, they do I don't know, regression. Pinterest, well, Quant does regression too, but we care about user experience. That's what people do, what people say, why they're saying what they say, what they're doing, but what are they doing on Pinterest? So a data scientist can tell you, hey, we have 300 million monthly active users. I care about what do they do on Pinterest, these people. That's the difference, I think. I don't know if that answered the question.
I think so, right? 那如果没有的话，那个同学可以加问一下哈。然后我们这边那个 Alan 同学有问一下说，关于第一个问题是说，这个 UX 的这个领域这条 career path，因为比如说我自己是读 accounting 的本科，我很知道说 accountant 到junior senior，然后我们可以 accounting manager，最后我们可以选择 CPA 所或者是 corporation。其实 accounting 我们就非常熟悉了哈。UX 整个领域其实我相信是比较新的，也是跟互联网跟更多的 search engine 出来有那么多 data 才出现更多咱们今天可以做的 UX 这种领域的工作，还算是相对于其他 traditional business 来讲 career 或是比较 new 的，所以想了解一下说这条 career path 是长什么样子的。
其实大家说 UX 比较新，其实我觉得 yes and no. Human factor before UX, the word is called human factor. 中文是什么 ？Human factor 人，
绝对不是工厂。那个是变量哈。我记得 factor 我们在学经济学叫做变量，一个 factor， right？ 那
比如说你造车业它要做，譬如说 safety insurance， 比如说它要 make sure the 司机坐在车里safe， so they have to do the safety insurance. So that's human factor.
有人可以帮我翻译一下我也还真的是这个
someone said 人体工学 yes, maybe that's the word.
人体工学。
So yeah, so like for example, if you're an automaker, you have to make sure your design is up to the standards for the safety. So you would recruit some people to sit in your car or simulating driving, right? So that's actually UX research. It's just called human factor 50 years ago.
Okay. 人因工程，哇。
Right. And the market research 市场学 has been around for a decade. UX was maybe it's just repackaged and more specialized in tech. But if you really trace back the history, it's been 100 years. But then yeah, so that's that. But the particular quantitative dates back 2003, I think, when Google invented. It was a spun out of the computer science separation. It is a small branch, so that's the HCI. We forgot what's your question again regarding the. You're muted.
Okay, sorry. So 那个 career path 就是说，换个角度来讲，如果我今天刚毕业，我是一个学这种，比如说像刚才说科班出身，或者是学一个 international study。If I become a UX junior researcher， 或者是一个简单的一个什么 associate， 那about how many years maybe how can I become maybe a lead 或者是一个 scientist 这样。而且 years 也很关键，像我们 accounting 基本上来讲可以2-3年，比如说从junior 到 senior 一般会2到3年，对吧？这行业里有一些 timeline。
Oh yeah, it really depends. It's your seniority, a tenure in your company. So you can be hired fresh out of college and you stayed in, say, Pinterest for 10 years. Sorry, for 5 years. Let's say you've been there for 5 years. You are a tenured employee at Pinterest. But I don't think you're very senior overall because you've had 5 years of industry out of college. PhD is slightly different because PhD that 5 years, even though it doesn't really count as industry experience, it's relevant, particularly for Quant. But usually I think you ask about promotion rank, I don't know, average 2 to 3 years, you might be moved up a level depending on your performance. But I think every 2 or 3 years, you might be promoted to a different level. And it really depends also on your interest. So some people like me I like to do IC work. So that's individual contributor, 个人工作, I think. And then you can go on management. So that's people management. So that's 管理工程.
Okay.
So you can be a people manager as you grow. So like I was an individual contributor. I wanted to manage a team of researchers. I switched my job to become a manager. Or I really enjoy doing research. That's why I want to do research. I stay in IC. So I just keep going up to very, very senior level IC work. So you have different way. And the third part, I think maybe this person was asking, hey, if I got into UX, do I always stay in UX? Do I do something else? My experience has been most UX researchers stay in research. I think there's something about research that attracts certain people and they like to do research and they stay in research, even though they might become a director of research or a people manager research. They stay in the research. Whereas some other field, you see more fluidity. So, hey, someone doing operation might become a project manager or become a product manager, or they might go from an analyst to become a data scientist, and from a data scientist to become a product manager.
Yeah.
Yes, so many analysts, because I feel like if you become an analyst, they're just like, where do I go? Do I become a data scientist or do I become a product manager? Researcher, for me, I have seen research staying in research.
Got it. 那我总结一下，就是说 UX 的这种研究员或者这方面的专家，还是比较 likely 去 stay 在这个 UX 的研究里面的，比较会大换一个 career 的角度不太多。像我刚才举例，像 accounting， 我们做到 senior 之后做 partner， 或者甚至有些去了一些大投行 IBD 或者去 merge， 其实确实换的还蛮多种的。可是在刚才 Kitty 学姐的意思是说 UX 这块还是大家是一般是比较学术性的人，会比较潜心做研究，所以一般来讲也不太会有太大的变化。而两个渠道，其实这个两个这种晋升空间跟 Facebook、Google 这种大公司比较像哈，就是到了 level 7、level 8左右的时候，你可以选择 I want to be a very strong， 更加一个像您刚才说的，就是独立的个体工作，把自己的技术专精到极致。也可以说，我想开始做 manager， 我想带队，我想 train 新的人，可能会有2种可以让你可以选一下。对吧？就是说，大多数会有这样的发展空间。
而且，我觉得这是一个 misconception that you have to manage people as you go more senior. At least in tech, maybe non-tech, I'm not sure you have to managing people. In tech, you do not have to. It's really hard. It's going to be harder for you to stay in a very, very senior IC track, but you can do it. And I've seen many people doing it.
Okay, good. 至少可以让那些不是很想带人的人，可以一生把自己的技术做到极致，对吧？ OK, got it. 好，那我们还有新的很多问题哈。这个问题我觉得可以有延续性一点。Leo 问的一个问题是说，刚才我们也提到很多专业都可以转进入 UX 这个领域，对吧？但是呢，但是其实也确实很难呢。现在工作，我也很理解 Leo 的问题哦。现在工作不好找。真的要进入 UX， 然后又不是科班出身，又没有相关经验的时候，其实真的是蛮不容易的。就没有工作经历找不到工作，没有专业找不到工作，那又没有工作经验，没有工作经历，专业也不对口，还想做 UX， 即便充满了热爱，可能也是很难做到的哈。所以他的问题是，如果是这么艰难的条件下，又没有人带你，又没有一个好的 leader， 又没有一个 team 你可以去学习的话，请问一个人该怎么样去prepare 自己可以变成一个 UX 呢
？Google search. Seriously.
Okay.
It's a joke. I think you can go online and search a lot of information about what it takes to become a UX research, how to break into UX research. And I think what's particularly helpful is if you can find a project yourself and you try it yourself. You might do it for free, volunteer. At least you can have a portfolio of something you could do. And that'll show people, number one, your motivation, your determination. You actually go try it. And you might try it yourself and realize how much you like or you dislike. But internet is a really useful, great resources. And informational interview, talking to people who are in the field you wanted to be and ask them how they get there.
这就是今天的这个话题的核心 question. See that?
And another thing, yeah, I'll say for PhD, so I had no idea what UX is until my second or third year, actually. And then there was a student leaving, graduating, and he was going to Google for quantitative UX research. And he was in my lab. And I was starting at Hopkins. And I was like, what is quant UX research? What is UX research? So I just went online to Google it myself. And I started reading all these books. And I was like, oh my God, what they do, I do in academia is just a different words. We call it hypothesis testing. They call it A/B testing.
Oh.
They recruit participants. We call it subjects. you do interview. We have them come to the labs. So that's how I learned. And then I think I was actually the first person who did an industry internship in my program because my program was heavily focused on academic research. I had no idea internship was a thing for PhDs. And I was talking to someone who was my friend at Stanford. She was doing a geophysics PhD. And for geophysics, you all required to do internship. So in her fourth year, she went to Shell to do oil, whatever internship. And it got me thinking, oh, maybe I could do an internship too. So let's see. And I just find out all the alumni on my program and say where they are now. And I found some UX researcher on that list, and I just reach out to them to learn about these things. So that's how I break in.
Got it.
So yes, there's a PhDs and there's non-PhDs. I think the trajectory is different, but I think overall it's Google search, find the people who are in the job you want, talk to them, and do something on your own to make your skill relevant to that requirement.
好。所以 Leo 同学，虽然说刚才 Kitty 学姐讲了很多，但有很多 PhD 啊，但如果你有 PhD， 如果你没有的话，之后加一下学姐的 LinkedIn， 记得跟她提到哈，谢谢今天参加这个活动，非常感谢您的这个演讲，然后我很想学习一下，这就是一个很好的一个机会哈。不过确实，career 要切入，即便是像Kitty 学姐这样，好像学霸中的学霸，当年要转 UX 的自我学习跟 research 这个过程，从 intern 开始。都是难免的，希望大家可以，我也希望所有找工作的同学们可以尽量，我们可以眼高，但手不要低。我们的目标定得很远大，但其实从头做起是很重要的，好吧？所以这个其实还是 seriously 可以大家要心态调整好吧。好，然后我们那个下一个问题哈 ，Sharon 这边问了一个说，junior level 可以，所以如果是 junior level 的这种 UX。如果是一个 resume， 因为我相信 Kitty 学姐你也有去面试过一些要教你团队的一些比较 junior 的人哈。如果 if you were the hiring manager 或者 HR resume 一出来的时候，你觉得什么样会让你 impress 到你？什么样的 keyword 或者什么样的 experience 会 impress 到你？然后就是什么样的 coding 一定有没有 coding skill 的面试？刚才有提到 UX 需要写代码的，要有一定的这种就 Quant UX。Quant 是一定要有这个的。那请问他就想说是要用 R 呢，还是 Python 呢，还是什么样的 language？ 对，就大概就是如果你是面试官，你会挑什么样的背景跟 skill set 的人这样子
？I would say first read the job description and make sure your resume has all the keywords that was mentioned in the resume. If the resume says A/B testing, you say hypothesis testing, parenthesis, A/B testing.
Okay.
So people know you're not bullshitting because if you're coming from academia, I know you're not running A/B test. So you want to be honest with me. I will say, hey, this person is honest. I know this person is not doing A/B test, but this person somehow find the relevance between hypothesis testing and A/B testing. So yeah, number one is keywords. You have to make sure your resume has all the keywords that the job description writes. And you have to make sure you tailor every resume to that job. So when I was applying for Qual versus Quant, I had a very different resume. Qual really cares about user interview, discussion guide, focus group. I make sure these words are front and center. And I know Quant, they care less about heuristic design. They care less about user testing. They care more about statistical data analysis and experimentation. And I put these words highlighted. You really have to tailor your resume. And the second, R or Python, it doesn't matter. If I see you have a coding experience, I know you will have no problem doing the other one. Here's another thing, SQL. You don't really do SQL when you're doing academic research because we create our own data set. We don't query some existing data set, at least in my field. But I have done this myself. So if I see someone who came from this relevant field, even though today they might not have SQL, I can tell this person can pick it up. So what does this mean? I think sometimes if you don't have that skill set, but if you present yourself on the resume such that I knew if you have the similar skill, I have the confidence that you can learn that new skill, I would pick that.
OK， 这个地方我也有一个，我觉得Kitty 学姐说的虽然是针对 UX 或 Quant 这个 job 对吧？但是其实我觉得这是 for any job， 希望大家可以pay attention。所有的 resume number one rule 不能一份 resume 去投所有的岗位的，你不能说我是个 engineer background 我就 use one resume to go apply any job right？ 一要看好这个 job description， 把一些 keywords make sure 会 show up on your resume。而第二个关键词，其实刚才 Kitty 学姐说的，不是简单的 copy paste， 因为我们也见过很多人，就是我就把你的整个 JD 对吧 copy 一下过来到我的 resume。那其实你以为人家这些 PhD 或者这些 hiring manager 不是傻的，真的像学姐说的，说如果你可以分析一下，虽然我没有做过 A/B test， 对吧？但是在我学校里的时候，我们学校称之为是另外一个 test。那我把它写进去的时候，其实是比较用心的。每一份简历都希望大家可以根据 job 的不一样，用心的去修改一下这里面的内容。用心不一定会有100%的回报，但我也可以肯定的是告诉大家说，会大大增加大家海投就一个简历，很多人说我投了100个公司，只有2-3家回我，这个比例是很 common， 但也是基于你用了一个简历去投了100个公司。假如你每一个工作你都认真仔细的修改过的话，去调整过这些简历，其实我觉得这个比例不应该这么低的了，好吧？所以这个我觉得
还有一个我想说的是，你 listing 你的 achievement， 你会说 I did XYZ, I did XYZ. I don't care if you did XYZ. I want to know so what. I managed I run 100 experiments, so what? So the result is I published a paper in whatever, or I spend some time working on this thing, so it results in revenue growth by something. I care about the so what part, so that's your impact. You want to be as specific as you can to quantify your impact. That's what people care. And also you want to make sure you're not lie on your resume. You can say I always say I worked with someone, I partnered with someone. It's always in the we part as opposed to I did this, I did that. It sounds weird because it's in your resume, so it has to be I. But if you can write it such that people know what you did as an individual, and what's your individual contribution resulting in a team outcome, that resume tells me you really thought about your resume. You're very humble. You're not lying about things you can't take credit for, and you have an impact. You don't just spend the time did something. You also had an outcome of that.
OK, thank you. 简历有很多的技巧，但有很多的就像我们平时说话一样，说话有很多的技巧，也有很多的这种学一些比较标准的一些什么比如说我们说的4个 P 对吧，3个 R 哈，这种说法有很多。但是其实用心的去写大家一份简历，告诉人家我做了这件事情造成了什么影响，影响了多少社会的一个 benefit， 或者是给公司带来什么 revenue， 这确实是一个 result driven 的一个 resume， 好吧？好，这个问题其实还是比较相关我们平时的工作这一行的哈。时间差不多哈，快6点钟了，所以呢，首先还是再次感谢一下 Kitty 学姐今天大力支持我们的活动。然后呢，希望大家小伙伴们呢，可以之后可以多 share， 我 share 一下这个 screen 是我们的这个页面 ，OK， 所以我们也会将来找更多的机会呢，可以让大家可以了解更多各行各业的专家是如何做自己的行业，去学习去咨询。因为入行之前能找到一个比自己多走几步的人，对吧？文道有先后，术业有专攻，找到合适的人去咨询一下 ，before 你去花10年、20年去做一行，其实能够提前知道一下这行是做什么的，对大家来讲其实是很有帮助的。所以呢，再次感谢今天 Kitty 学姐分享的这些经验，我们之后也会把今天的聊天内容发布在我们公司的那个 LinkedIn 啊、Facebook 啊、YouTube 上面。大家呢可以再去回顾一下，如果朋友没有看到的话呢，也希望大家可以多去咀嚼回味。任何其他的问题的话呢，可以联系我们公司，或者我们也很欢迎大家可以 LinkedIn 上，你们想尽办法让 Kitty 学姐愿意加你们的 LinkedIn 回答你们的问题，但是不要包的太多，好吧，同志们。所以任何相关的问题可以再去查阅我们公司的主页。 好，那今天
actually 你可以我希望大家可以 Google 一下 informational interview and understand what is an informational interview. When you interview people, number one thing, you do not ask for a job, you do not ask for a referral. No, I'm serious. That's what I did. Your sole purpose is to be curious and find out what this person does and how he or she gets there.
Yes.
Because if you come with an intent, it's the end of the conversation, I'm going to ask you for a referral. That come across as very insincere, and that will hurt you along the way. So when I was doing informational interview, I made it very clear, I do not want you to refer me. I do not want you to give me a job. I really, really genuinely just wanted to know what you are doing and how you get there. And do you have any advice for me?
Yep. 好了，同志们，听到了吧？这也是给大家最后的一个点啊。但这个点，我相信记住，精诚所至，金石为开，不是那么的功利跟趋一个目的性，对吧？所以希望大家也可以最后这个虽然是有点小严厉的 Kitty 学姐哈，但这句话是真的。如果可以做到，我们内心的目的是一份工作，这没有错，对吧 ？However， 在 before 你找到 job 之前，或者要人家 refer 你之前，你需要得到人家的认可，而这个认可来自于你的诚意是非常重要的。
而且我想说的是 one last point. Actually, one of my when I was doing informational interview. The interviewer actually told me, hey, I have a job. Are you interested in applying? So that's the thing. Throughout the conversation, your interviewer is actually assessing you. And if this person find out what you are asking, what you're talking about, actually is relevant to what this job was looking for, we're going to ask you, by the way, are you interested in this job? So that's some unexpected. Don't expect this happen all the time, but this is some unexpected surprise you might come across sometimes when you are not really thinking about getting a referral. You might actually end up getting one.
OK， 好，谢谢大家了，再谢谢 Kitty 学姐。然后呢，大家今天如果什么时候回尾，可以再联系我们。好了，那1个小时时间到了，谢谢 Kitty 学姐，非常感谢您了，好吧？那大家今天就到此为止，好，拜拜，拜拜，下次见。